In the early 2000s, shooters became self-sufficient, emulating multiplayer without the need for human opponents. Heavy Metal Geomatrix is not a shooter. It's an arcade game inspired by the likes of Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament while playing more closely to fighters like virtua-on and Power Stone. Geomatrix has a high learning curve, but it's well worth the effort.
Bring it on, sucker!
The Geomatrix is a virtual reality arena of gladiatorial combat. 4 teams, comprised of 3 members each, have entered cyberspace. Honor, anarchy, and sadism are just a few of the motivators pushing combatants forward. The story is kept to a minimum, being almost solely reserved for the completion of arcade mode with any given character. Eastman served as a creative consultant for the game, while Bisley helped with the character design. This is a heavy metal production through and through. The setting is so rich and varied, it's easy to get lost in the setting despite the lack of narrative. At first glance, Geomatrix may look like a third-person shooter. With the predominant use of ranged weaponry and emphasis on dashing and strafing, this is a fair assumption. However, there's no actual aiming involved. Rather, you lock onto your target and simply fire. Weapons have 2 firing modes, with each mode of fire traveling at a different speed. Geomatrix asks players time their shots rather than aim them. Choosing the right weapon for you, or at least for your current predicament, is what the game is all about. Ammo is scarce and weapons take time to respawn. You'll need to keep a careful eye on your opponents, racing them to new weapons or power-ups and gaining a favorable vantage point.
This will do!
Dexterity and how it's managed is what tends to turn people off of Geomatrix. Running, dashing, primary and secondary fires, jumping, and locking on can take some getting used to. The default control scheme seems scattered for the first few rounds. With practice, you'll become more nimble. The DC control pad has been effectively utilized, better than the arcade stick in many ways. There is a fluctuating dynamism to the combat. Melee may be more viable than ranged, given you are quick enough to cut around your opposition. Retreat may be a better option than an open brawl, especially when facing 2 opponents. After a few runs through arcade mode on easy, you'll be eager for faster, fiercer competition.
I need this!
Each team is made up of a nimble, heavy, and medium character. Stats like damage and movement speed vary between the cast. Each character also has a unique starting weapon. Nimble and medium characters are the easiest to learn with, though once you get the handle on timing, speed, and the different weapons, it comes down to a matter of preference.
Let the battle begin.
Heavy Metal Geomatrix is broken into 3 game modes: Arcade, Versus, and Geomatrix. Arcade is a standard 8-round ladder with matches switching between 1-on-1 and 2-on-1. Versus allows players to duke it out via split screen. There are several maps present in this mode not available in standard arcade run. Geomatrix is a sort of challenge mode. There are 4 ladders, 1 for each team. Objectives consist of collecting keys, defeating enemies, and reaching the exit portal before the clock runs out. Though the combat is strong enough to stand on its own in arcade and versus modes, Geomatrix is a nice distraction for players wanting to hone their skills even further. Beating old times and scores make this mode very replayable. If there's one complaint, it is the camera. While focused on a combatant, it works perfectly. However, with no way to adjust it in-game, nor reset it once locked on, platforming sections can be a nightmare. Geomatrix looks good for an early Dreamcast game. The frame rate never dips, visual effects for the different guns as well as stage effects like water are vibrant, atmospheric, and colorful. Heavy Metal Geomatrix looks and plays like a comic book. The soundtrack is made up of, you guessed it, heavy metal. It's a great album by all accounts and adds a lot to the fight. Though, if it's not your taste, you can easily switch it off in the options menu. Heavy Metal Geomatrix is often forgotten when the topics of bot shooters or Dreamcast greats come up. It's not the deepest fighter around, but just because one can master the game doesn't mean it isn't challenging, nor does it mean it isn't fun. Geomatrix packs a ridiculous amount of replayability for only having 3 modes of play, and that says something about how tight the gameplay is. Fans of action comic books and bot games will have a lot of fun with Geomatrix given they put in the time.